The smell hit me first: garlic, butter, and expensive wine mingling with the sharp tang of fear that seemed to live permanently in my pores these days. I moved through the dining room of Castello Nero like a ghost, my worn shoes silent against the marble floor, my black uniform blending into the shadows between tables. Nobody looked at me. They never did. I was part of the furniture, another nameless face serving overpriced pasta to people who wouldn't remember me 5 minutes after I cleared their plates. My feet ached. Everything ached. The double shift was killing me, but I needed the money. God, I always needed the money. Rent was due in 3 days, and Mrs. Chen had already slipped the final notice under my door. The red letters screaming at me every time I came home to my shoebox apartment in Chinatown. 23 years old and drowning, working 2 jobs and still barely scraping by in this city that chewed up girls like me and spit them out without a second thought. "Table 7 needs water," Marco hissed at me as I passed the bar, his eyes darting nervously toward the back corner. "And don't fuck it up. Those guys, just be invisible, capiche?" I nodded, grabbing the crystal pitcher with hands that had started trembling somewhere around hour 9 of my shift. Table 7. The VIP section, roped off with velvet cords that might as well have been prison bars separating their world from mine. I'd served back there before. Politicians, celebrities, people whose watch cost more than my annual salary. But tonight felt different. The air back there was thicker, charged with something electric and dangerous. I approached slowly, eyes down like Marco had taught me. Never make eye contact with the important ones. Never speak unless spoken to. Be a shadow. Be nothing. Be... The scent of bergamot and something darker, something like smoke and leather and old money, stopped me 3 feet from the table. My breath caught. I couldn't help it. I looked up. 4 men sat in the shadows, but only one mattered. Only one pulled at something primal in my chest, making my pulse stutter and restart like a broken engine. He sat at the head of the table, perfectly still in a way that suggested violence held in check. A loaded gun with the safety off. His suit was black, so black it seemed to absorb light, tailored so precisely it looked painted on. Dark hair swept back from a face that belonged in a Renaissance painting. All sharp angles and cruel beauty. A jaw that could cut glass, lips that had probably never smiled at anything innocent. But it was his eyes that paralyzed me. Even in the low light, I could see they were the color of winter storms, gray and cold and absolutely devastating. They flicked up to me, just for a second, and I felt stripped bare, dissected, catalogued and dismissed in a single heartbeat. "Water," I whispered, hating how my voice cracked. "Would you gentlemen like... leave it?" His voice was quiet, barely above a murmur, but it sliced through the ambient noise like a blade. Italian accent, thick as honey and twice as dangerous. He didn't look at me again, returning his attention to the man across from him. And somehow that was worse than his gaze. I was nothing, less than nothing. I poured with shaking hands, water splashing slightly on the tablecloth. One of the other men, built like a tank, scar across his jaw, glared at me with open hostility. The man in black didn't react, didn't even blink. I finished and backed away, my heart hammering so hard I thought it might crack my ribs. "Who is that?" I heard one of them ask in Italian as I retreated. I'd picked up some of the language working here, enough to understand. "Nobody," another voice answered. "Just a girl. Just a girl. Just another invisible girl in a city full of them." I made it back to the kitchen before my knees went weak, leaning against the cold steel counter and trying to remember how to breathe. Rosa, the head chef, glanced at me with knowing eyes. "You served the Valentino table," she said, not a question. "The what?" Her weathered face went pale. "Madre di Dio, you don't know. That's Dante Valentino. The Dante Valentino." The name meant nothing to me, but the way she said it, like a prayer and a curse, made my blood run cold. "He owns half the city," Rosa continued, crossing herself. "The other half wishes he did. Mafia tesoro, old blood, dangerous blood. You stay away from men like that. They don't see girls like us as human. We're just, she gestured vaguely, disposable. I swallowed hard, nodding. Disposable. Yeah, I knew all about that. The rest of the shift blurred together in a haze of exhaustion and anxiety. I kept my distance from table 7, let Marco handle their orders, their wine, their mysterious conversations in rapid Italian that made the air around them vibrate with tension. But I felt his presence like a black hole, bending gravity, impossible to ignore even when I wasn't looking. It was after midnight when my second disaster struck. I was carrying a tray of dirty dishes back to the kitchen, my vision swimming with fatigue, when my shoe, my stupid worn-out shoe with the sole that had been flapping loose for a week, caught on the edge of a carpet. The world tilted. The tray flew from my hands in a slow-motion arc of catastrophic inevitability and crashed directly onto table 7. Glass shattered. Wine exploded across that perfect black suit like blood. Plates clattered and spun, and in the center of the chaos, Dante Valentino sat perfectly still, red wine dripping from his jacket, his face carved from marble, his storm-gray eyes lifting to mine with an expression I couldn't read. The restaurant went silent. Absolutely. Completely silent. My voice came out as barely a squeak. I'm so sorry, I didn't mean... my shoe, I'm so sorry. One of his men was already standing, hand moving toward his jacket in a gesture that made my blood freeze. But Valentino raised one finger, just one, and the man stopped like he'd been turned to stone. You, Valentino said quietly, his eyes never leaving mine. Come here. My legs moved without my permission, carrying me around the table until I stood directly in front of him. This close, I could see the wine soaking into the fabric of his suit, probably ruining thousands of dollars worth of Italian craftsmanship. This close, I could smell that bergamot again, mixed now with red wine and something else. Something that made my head spin and my stomach knot with an emotion that wasn't quite fear. Your name. Not a question. A command. Sophie. Sophie Chen. Why did I give him my last name? Why did I give him anything? Sophie Chen, he repeated, tasting each syllable like wine. You've just destroyed a $10,000 suit, Sophie Chen. $10,000. I was going to die. I was going to die right here on the marble floor of Castello Nero, and nobody would even remember my name tomorrow. I started, then stopped. What could I possibly say? I didn't have $10 to my name, let alone 10,000. I'll work it off. However long it takes, you'll work it off, he interrupted. And something flickered in those winter eyes. Amusement. Interest. How much do you make in a night, Sophie Chen? Answer me. The command in his voice made my spine straighten involuntarily. Maybe 200. On a good night, with tips. He did the math in his head, and the corner of his mouth curved, not quite a smile, more like the shadow of one. So you're offering me approximately 50 nights of your labor, 50 nights of serving wine and clearing tables to pay for a suit I'll simply throw away. Put like that, it sounded absurd. It sounded like exactly what it was. A poor girl's desperate attempt to avoid consequences she could never afford. I don't have anything else to offer, I whispered, hating the tears burning behind my eyes. I wouldn't cry. I refused to cry in front of him. He studied me for a long moment, his gaze traveling from my face down to my worn shoes and back up again, cataloging every detail of my poverty, my exhaustion, my absolute vulnerability. I felt naked under that stare, stripped of every defense I'd built up working in this city that devoured girls like me for breakfast. No, he said finally. You don't. He stood then, unfolding from his chair with a predatory grace that made me step back instinctively. He was taller than I'd realized, at least 6'2", his wine-stained suit somehow making him look more dangerous rather than less. He pulled out his phone, not a regular phone, something sleek and foreign-looking, and made a call in rapid Italian that I could barely follow. Marco, he called, and the manager appeared so fast he must have been hovering nearby. This girl. She works for me now. You'll receive compensation for losing her. Understood? Yes, Mr. Valentino. Of course, Mr. Valentino. Marco didn't even glance at me. I'd just been sold like a piece of furniture, and he was already calculating his compensation. Wait, I said, finding my voice somewhere in the terror. I don't understand. Work for you how? Doing what? Valentino looked at me again, and this time that almost smile deepened into something that made my stomach flip in a way that had nothing to do with fear, and everything to do with a hunger I didn't want to name. You'll find out tomorrow, he said. Giovanni. The tank-like man with the scar stepped forward. Take her home. Get her address. She's to be picked up at 8 a.m. Bring appropriate clothing. And Sophie. He stepped closer, close enough that I could feel the heat radiating from his body, close enough to smell the wine on his ruined suit, and that devastating cologne underneath. Don't run. I have a very long reach, and I don't like to chase. It bores me. And when I'm bored, I get creative. Capisce? I nodded, not trusting my voice. He held my gaze for another heartbeat, 2, 3, then turned and walked away, his remaining men falling into formation around him like soldiers around a general. I watched them disappear through the restaurant's private exit, my mind spinning, my body trembling with adrenaline and something else I didn't want to examine. Miss? Giovanni's gravelly voice made me jump. We should go. The ride to my apartment happened in a blur. The black SUV with tinted windows, the leather seats that probably cost more than my monthly rent, Giovanni's silent presence in the driver's seat like a stone guardian. He didn't speak, didn't explain, just waited while I fumbled with my keys at the door of my building, making note of the address with cold efficiency. 8 a.m., he repeated as I stumbled out onto the sidewalk. Don't make Mr. Valentino wait. I watched the SUV disappear into the night, then climbed the 4 flights to my apartment on legs that felt like water. Inside, I locked every lock, 2 deadbolts and a chain, and slid down the door until I was sitting on my threadbare carpet, shaking. What had I just agreed to? What had I just been sold into? I should run. I should pack what little I had and disappear into the city's sprawl, become another faceless girl that nobody would remember or miss. But even as the thought formed, I knew I wouldn't. Couldn't. Because Dante Valentino's voice echoed in my head. I have a very long reach, and something told me that running would be the worst decision I could possibly make. And underneath the fear, buried beneath layers of self-preservation and common sense, was something else. Something that made my pulse quicken when I remembered those winter storm eyes. That quiet command, the way he'd looked at me like I was a puzzle he intended to solve. I was disposable, Rosa had said. We were all disposable to men like him. So why did I feel like I'd just been collected? I didn't sleep. How could I? I spent the night pacing my tiny apartment, watching the digital clock on my microwave tick toward 8 a.m. with the inexorable march of an executioner's countdown. Every sound in the building made me jump. Footsteps in the hallway, the couple upstairs arguing, the rattle of pipes in the walls. By the time gray dawn light filtered through my single window, I'd convinced myself a dozen times that this was all some fever dream, that I'd wake up and still be just another struggling waitress with nothing more dramatic in my life than overdue rent. Then 7:30 arrived, and with it, a knock at my door. Not Giovanni's fist, but something lighter, almost polite. I opened it to find a young woman in an immaculate black suit, her dark hair pulled into a severe bun, her expression professionally blank. She held several large garment bags and a leather case. Miss Chen, I'm Lucia. Mr. Valentino sent me to assist you. Her English was perfect, barely accented. She swept past me into the apartment without waiting for an invitation. Her eyes taking in my poverty with the same clinical detachment a doctor might observe a wound. We need to prepare you. Prepare me for what? My voice came out hoarse from lack of sleep. Lucia set the bags on my thrift store couch and began unzipping them with efficient movements. Your new position requires certain standards. You'll need appropriate attire and you should shower. I've brought toiletries. I watched, numb, as she pulled out clothes that looked like they cost more than everything I owned combined. Black slacks and some butter-soft fabric. Silk blouses in cream and charcoal. A structured blazer that probably had an Italian designer's name stitched inside. Even the undergarments looked expensive. Delicate lace things that made my cotton Walmart basics look like rags. I don't understand what's happening, I said, and hated how small my voice sounded. Where am I going? What does he want from me? Lucia's expression softened fractionally. the first hint of humanity breaking through her professional mask. Mr. Valentino doesn't explain himself to staff, but you should know. He doesn't acquire people without purpose. Whatever he sees in you, it's kept you alive. That's more than most can say. The words should have terrified me. Instead, they sent a strange thrill down my spine that I immediately tried to suppress. What the hell was wrong with me? I showered in water that never quite got hot, using the expensive products Lucia had brought. Shampoo that smelled like jasmine and something exotic. Body wash that left my skin feeling softer than it had in years. When I emerged, wrapped in my threadbare towel, Lucia had everything laid out like a soldier's inspection kit. She dressed me with impersonal efficiency, her hands quick and practiced, adjusting seams and checking fit with the concentration of an artist. The clothes transformed me. I stared at my reflection in the mirror, the only mirror I owned, propped against the wall, and barely recognized myself. The black slacks hugged my curves in a way my cheap uniforms never had. The cream blouse made my skin look less sallow, less exhausted. The blazer gave me shoulders, structure, presence. Your hair, Lucia murmured, already working product through the damp strands. She styled it simply, elegantly, pulling it back from my face in a way that felt sophisticated. Minimal makeup followed, just enough to hide the dark circles under my eyes, to bring color to my lips. There. Much better. Better for what? I asked again, but she was already packing up, checking her phone. Giovanni is downstairs. Don't keep him waiting. The SUV was identical to last night's. Black, enormous, windows tinted so dark I couldn't see inside until Giovanni opened the rear door. The interior smelled like leather, and that bergamot scent that I was starting to associate with danger and expensive things. Giovanni's scarred face revealed nothing as I climbed in, my new clothes feeling foreign against my skin. We drove in silence through Manhattan's morning traffic, heading downtown toward neighborhoods I rarely visited, places where the buildings got taller and the people got richer, and girls like me didn't belong. I watched the city transform through the tinted glass, my reflection ghostly against the passing streets. Where are we going? I finally asked, unable to bear the silence any longer. Giovanni's eyes flicked to mine in the rearview mirror. For a moment I thought he wouldn't answer. Then, Mr. Valentino's office. He has matters to discuss with you. What kind of matters? Not my place to say, miss. The building we stopped in front of made my breath catch. A sleek tower of glass and steel in the financial district. The kind of place I'd walked past 1,000 times without ever imagining I'd enter. Giovanni guided me through a private entrance, past security guards who nodded respectfully, into an elevator that required a key card to operate. The numbers climbed. 20 floors, 30, 40. We stopped at 50. The doors opened onto what could only be described as a penthouse office. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of Manhattan that made me dizzy. The city spread out below like a glittering kingdom, the morning sun turning the East River to molten gold. The space was all dark wood and leather, expensive art on the walls that I didn't recognize but knew instinctively was priceless. And in the center of it all, standing behind a massive desk with his back to me, was Dante Valentino. He'd changed from his wine-stained suit into fresh armor, charcoal gray this time, perfectly tailored. His dark hair still damp like he'd showered recently. He was on the phone, speaking rapid Italian that sounded like orders being given and received. Giovanni nudged me forward gently, then retreated, leaving me standing alone on an expanse of marble floor that felt like a stage. Valentino turned, his storm-gray eyes finding me with the same devastating intensity as last night. He ended his call mid-sentence, his full attention shifting to me in a way that made my skin prickle with awareness. For a long moment he just looked, his gaze traveling over Lucia's work with an expression I couldn't read. "Better," he said finally, echoing Lucia's words. "Sit." He gestured to one of the leather chairs facing his desk. I sat, feeling like a student called to the principal's office, my hands folded in my lap to hide their trembling. Valentino settled into his own chair with that predatory grace, lacing his fingers together on the desk between us. "Do you know who I am, Sophie Chen?" His voice was quieter than last night, almost conversational but no less commanding. "Rosa said you're Mafia, that you own half the city." The words tumbled out before I could stop them. His eyebrow rose fractionally. Surprise? Amusement? Rosa is a wise woman. Yes, I am what they call Mafia, though I prefer to think of myself as a businessman with traditional values and methods that are sometimes unconventional. I own legitimate enterprises throughout New York and beyond: restaurants, real estate, import-export businesses. I also handle matters that exist in what you might call gray areas of the law. He paused, watching my reaction. Does this frighten you? Yes, I admitted, because lying seemed pointless. Good. Fear is honest. Fear keeps you alive. He leaned back in his chair, still watching me with those winter eyes. I have a problem, Sophie. A problem that, strangely enough, you might be able to solve. Me? I'm nobody. You're just a waitress who destroyed my suit. He interrupted. A waitress who offered to work off a debt she could never repay. A waitress who caught the attention of some very dangerous people last night when she made her spectacular scene. My blood went cold. What people? I have enemies, Sophie. Many enemies. Men who would love nothing more than to see me vulnerable, to find a weakness they could exploit. Last night, 3 of those men were dining at Castello Nero, watching my table, looking for any information they could use against me. He stood, moving to the window, his silhouette dark against the morning light. They saw you spill wine on me. They saw my reaction, or rather, my lack of reaction, and they drew conclusions. What conclusions? My voice was barely a whisper. He turned back to me, and something in his expression made my heart stutter. That you mean something to me, that you're important enough for me to show mercy to, that perhaps you're valuable, but I'm not. I don't mean anything to you. We just met. They don't know that. He moved closer, perching on the edge of his desk directly in front of me, close enough that I had to tilt my head back to meet his eyes. Perception is reality in my world, Sophie. If they believe you're mine, if they believe I care about you, then you become a target, a tool to be used against me. The implications hit me like ice water. So what does that mean? What happens to me? It means you have 2 choices. He held up one finger. 1, I can make you disappear, quietly, efficiently. You would simply cease to exist and my enemies would assume I eliminated a loose end. You'd be relocated, given a new identity, enough money to start over somewhere far from New York. You'd be safe, but you'd be alone, looking over your shoulder for the rest of your life. My throat closed, and the second choice? His second finger rose. You stay. You become what they already believe you are. Someone under my protection. You work for me. Live in a property I control, become part of my world. I keep you safe from the threats you're now exposed to because of me. In return, you do exactly what I tell you, when I tell you, without question. That's not a choice, I said, anger cutting through the fear. That's captivity dressed up in silk. Something flashed in his eyes. Respect, maybe, or recognition. Perhaps. But it's captivity where you live, Sophie. Where you eat well, sleep in a real bed, stop working yourself to death for pennies, where you're protected from men who would hurt you just to hurt me. He leaned closer, and I caught that bergamot scent again, intoxicating and dangerous. Is that really worse than your freedom? That apartment with the broken lock, the jobs that pay barely enough to survive? The invisibility that you wear like armor because nobody in this city gives a damn if you live or die? His words cut because they were true. Every syllable was a knife finding soft flesh, exposing the reality I'd been trying to ignore. I was disposable. I was drowning. And he was offering me a lifeboat, even if that lifeboat came with chains. Why? I asked, my voice breaking. Why do you care? Why not just do what you said, make me disappear? Why give me a choice at all? Valentino was silent for a long moment, studying my face with an intensity that made me feel transparent. Because you interest me, he said finally. Because when you spilled that wine, you didn't run, you didn't make excuses or blame your shoes or the carpet. You took responsibility and offered to make it right, even knowing you couldn't. That's rare in my world. Integrity, even small integrity, is valuable. So I'm what? A curiosity? A pet project? You're an asset that might become something more. He straightened, moving back behind his desk, putting professional distance between us again. I need an answer, Sophie, now. Because my enemies are watching, and every moment you're unprotected is a moment they can strike. I thought about my apartment, my double shifts, my life of invisible servitude that would grind me down until there was nothing left but exhaustion and forgotten dreams. I thought about Mrs. Chen's eviction notice, about the way Marco had sold me without a second glance, about Rosa's words, disposable. And I thought about Dante Valentino's eyes, winter gray and devastating, looking at me like I was something worth protecting, worth keeping. It wasn't really a choice at all. I'll stay, I whispered. He nodded, unsurprised, and pulled out his phone, more rapid Italian, orders being given. When he finished, he looked at me again, and for the first time, I saw something almost like satisfaction in his expression. Giovanni will take you to your new residence. You'll find it considerably more comfortable than your current accommodations. Tomorrow, we begin your real training. You'll learn how to move in my world, how to speak, how to act. You'll learn what to say and what to never say. And you'll learn to trust that I keep what's mine safe. What's yours? I repeated, the words tasting strange on my tongue. Yes, Sophie. As of this moment, you belong to me. Your safety is my responsibility. Your actions reflect on me. Your life is now intertwined with mine in ways you don't yet understand. He came around the desk again, and this time when he approached, I didn't flinch. He reached out, his fingers catching my chin, tilting my face up to his. His touch was warm, gentle even, but there was steel underneath, command disguised as caress. Don't make me regret this decision. I reward loyalty, but betrayal I cannot forgive. I understand, I managed, though I wasn't sure I understood anything anymore. Good. He released me, stepped back. Giovanni is waiting. Go. I stood on shaking legs and made it to the elevator before I allowed myself to breathe. As the doors closed, I caught one last glimpse of Dante Valentino standing in his kingdom of glass and steel, backlit by the Manhattan skyline, already back on his phone conducting whatever dark business kept his empire running, and I realized with a clarity that should have terrified me, I'd just traded one prison for another. The only difference was that this cage was gilded, and the man holding the key was far more dangerous than poverty had ever been. The apartment, no, the penthouse, that Giovanni delivered me to, existed in a different universe than the one I'd left that morning. 43rd floor of a building in Tribeca, all floor-to-ceiling windows and open space that made my old shoebox look like a closet. Hardwood floors that gleamed like honey, furniture that looked like art, a kitchen with appliances I didn't know how to operate. And the view. God. The view of the Hudson River turning gold in the afternoon light made something in my chest ache. Mr. Valentino owns the building, Giovanni explained, his gravelly voice softer than usual as he watched me take it all in. Security on every floor, cameras in all common areas. You're safe here, Miss Chen. Safest place in the city for you right now. It's too much, I whispered, running my fingers along the granite countertop. I don't deserve... Mr. Valentino determines what you deserve. He set a phone on the counter, sleek, foreign-looking, like Valentino's. This is yours now. Only 3 numbers programmed. Mr. Valentino, myself, and Lucia. You don't call anyone else. You don't give this number to anyone else. Capisce? I nodded, picking up the phone like it might bite me. The screen lit up at my touch, showing a background of solid black. No apps except phone, messages, and camera. A leash disguised as technology. Your things from your old apartment will be collected and brought here tomorrow. Lucia will return in the morning to continue your preparation. Giovanni moved toward the door, then paused. Miss Chen. Sophie. I've worked for Mr. Valentino for 12 years. I've seen him angry, violent, even cruel when necessary, but I've never seen him go to this much trouble for someone before. Whatever he sees in you, don't waste it. And don't betray it. He's given you a chance most people in your position don't get. What position is that? I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted the answer. Alive, Giovanni said simply, and left. I spent the rest of that day exploring my gilded cage, opening closets to find them already stocked with clothes in my size. How did they know my size? testing the massive bed with its sheets that felt like clouds, standing at the windows and watching the city move below like I was a queen surveying her kingdom. Except I wasn't a queen. I was a prisoner who'd been given a nicer cell. Night fell, and with it came the fear. Every shadow looked like a threat. Every sound made me jump. I kept thinking about Valentino's words. Enemies watching, targets, tools to be used, and wondering if men with guns were already planning how to get to me, how to hurt him through me. I should have felt safer 43 floors up with security and cameras. Instead, I felt exposed, visible, a bird in a cage with glass walls. The phone buzzed at 10 p.m., making me nearly drop it. A message. No name, but I knew who it was from. Sleep. Giovanni will collect you at 8 a.m. Wear the black dress in the closet. No greeting. No pleasantries. Just commands. I should have been angry. Instead, I felt something settle in my chest. The weird comfort of knowing someone was watching, even if that someone was dangerous. I found the dress. Black, obviously. Designer label I vaguely recognized from magazine covers. It hugged every curve, ended just above my knees, and made me look like someone who belonged in this world of penthouses and private security. I hung it on the bathroom door and stared at it like it was evidence of my transformation. Yesterday, I was Sophie Chen, invisible waitress. Today I was... what? Dante Valentino's property, his pet, his responsibility. I didn't sleep that night either. Morning came with Lucia's efficient knock. She'd brought a team this time, a hairstylist who worked magic with hot tools, a makeup artist who painted my face with such skill I looked like a different person. Elegant, polished, expensive. The dress fit perfectly, of course. Everything in this new life fit perfectly, like it had been planned down to the last detail. "Where am I going?" I asked, as Lucia fastened a delicate gold necklace around my throat. It felt like a collar. "Mr. Valentino is taking you to lunch, a public appearance. You'll be seen together, photographed together. By tomorrow, everyone who matters will know you're under his protection." She met my eyes in the mirror. "This is important, Sophie. How you act, what you say, even how you look at him. It all sends a message. You need to appear comfortable, content, chosen. Not scared, not coerced. Can you do that?" "I don't know," I admitted. "Then learn quickly. Your life may depend on it." Giovanni collected me at noon, but this time the SUV took us to a different part of the city, uptown, where old money lived and breathed. We stopped in front of a restaurant I'd seen featured in magazines, the kind of place where reservations were made months in advance, and the waitstaff probably earned more than I had at both my jobs combined. Valentino was waiting at a corner table, his back to the wall, always aware of exits, entrances, threats. He wore navy today, the color making his gray eyes even more striking, and when he saw me, something flickered across his face. Approval, possession. He stood as I approached, the gesture old world and courtly, pulling out my chair himself. "You look perfect," he said quietly, his hand lingering briefly on my shoulder, a touch that looked affectionate but felt like a claim being staked. "Remember, we're being watched. Smile, Sophie. You're supposed to be happy to be here." I smiled. It felt like a mask, but I wore it anyway, letting him pour me wine that probably cost more than my former monthly rent. Around us, I could feel eyes tracking our every move. The other diners pretending not to stare while absolutely staring, the staff moving with extra care around our table. And somewhere, I couldn't see them, but I felt them, were Valentino's men, shadows keeping watch. "Tell me about yourself," Valentino said, playing the role of attentive date. "Your family." "There's not much to tell." I sipped the wine. It was incredible, smooth, and rich. My mother was Chinese, immigrated when she was 20. My father was American, white, from somewhere in the Midwest. He left before I was born. Mom died when I was 19. Cancer. I've been on my own since then. Something in his expression shifted. A crack in the marble facade. No other family? None that claims me. Mom's family in China never approved of her marrying an American. My father's family never knew I existed. The words came easier than I expected. Maybe because of the wine, Maybe because pretending to be on a date made it feel like confession. I'm nobody's daughter, nobody's sister, nobody's anything. Just Sophie Chen, taking up space in a city that doesn't care if I disappear. You're not nobody anymore, Valentino said, and his hand covered mine on the table. Warm, strong, absolutely deliberate for the cameras I couldn't see but knew were there. You're mine. That means something in this city, does it? I met his eyes, forgetting for a moment that this was performance. Or am I just another asset in your portfolio, something you own, like this restaurant or that building or whatever else you've collected? His fingers tightened fractionally on mine. Careful, Sophie. We're in public. You told me to look comfortable. Comfortable people ask questions. A smile ghosted across his lips. Genuine this time, I thought, not just for show. Brave little bird. Yes, you're an asset. But assets have value. They're protected, maintained, kept safe from harm. Is that not better than the alternative? The alternative being? Being nothing. Being invisible. Being the girl who works herself to death and dies unmourned in a city that eats people like you for breakfast. He leaned closer, his voice dropping. I'm offering you significance, Sophie. Purpose. A place in a world that would otherwise crush you. All I ask in return is loyalty and obedience. Is that truly so terrible? The waiter arrived before I could answer, presenting dishes I hadn't ordered but that looked and smelled divine. Valentino had ordered for both of us, I realized. Another small demonstration of control, of ownership. I should have been angry. Instead, I ate the perfectly prepared fish and let him guide the conversation, playing my role as the captivated companion, while my mind spun in circles. This was my life now, this performance, this pretense, this elaborate theater where I was both prisoner and princess, where danger lurked behind every smile and safety came with a price tag of absolute submission. And the terrifying part, the part I couldn't admit even to myself. A piece of me was starting to like it. After lunch, Valentino walked me through the restaurant, his hand at the small of my back, possessive, protective. Outside, photographers were waiting. I tensed, but he murmured in my ear, "Smile, dolcezza. Show them you're happy. Dolcezza, sweetness." The endearment felt like honey laced with poison. The cameras flashed, catching us together in a moment that would be distributed across gossip sites and social media within hours. Dante Valentino and his mysterious new companion. The Mafia boss and the unknown girl. By tomorrow, everyone in his world would know my face. My name. My status as his. What? Girlfriend? Mistress? Property? Back in the SUV, the performance dropped. Valentino was immediately on his phone, back to conducting business in rapid Italian, his earlier warmth evaporating like it had never existed. I watched Manhattan slide past the tinted windows and wondered if this was how it would always be. Moments of calculated intimacy followed by cold distance, never knowing which version of him was real. Tomorrow you begin training in earnest, he said suddenly, ending his call and turning those winter eyes on me. Lucia will teach you etiquette, languages, how to read people and situations. You'll learn about my organization, my enemies, my allies. You need to be able to navigate my world without becoming a liability. And if I can't, if I'm not smart enough or quick enough or whatever enough, he studied me for a long moment, then you'll try harder. Failure is not an option I accept, Sophie. Not from my people, and especially not from you. Why especially not from me? Because I've invested in you. Because people are watching to see if you're a weakness or a weapon. Because... He stopped, seemed to reconsider his words. Because I don't like to lose what's mine. There it was again. Mine. The word that should have made me feel owned, but instead made me feel anchored. Tethered to something solid in a life that had always felt like drowning. The SUV stopped in front of my building, my new building. Giovanni appeared to open my door, but Valentino's hand caught my wrist before I could exit. One more thing. His grip was firm but not painful, his thumb tracing the delicate bones of my wrist in a gesture that felt far too intimate. My enemies know about you now. They've seen the photos. Some will try to approach you, to turn you against me, to use you. If anyone contacts you, anyone at all, you tell me immediately. Understood? What will you do to them? I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted the answer. His smile was cold, empty of anything resembling mercy. What I do to anyone who touches what belongs to me, I'll eliminate the threat. He released me, and I fled into the building's lobby, my wrist burning where he'd touched me, my mind reeling from the casual way he'd spoken about elimination, about violence, about possession. This was real. This was my life now, and there was no going back to being invisible, anonymous Sophie Chen. That night, alone in my penthouse prison, I stood at the windows and watched the city lights sparkle like diamonds scattered across black velvet. Somewhere out there, Valentino's enemies were planning, watching, waiting for me to become the weakness they needed. And somewhere, Valentino himself was conducting his dark business, moving pieces on a board I couldn't see, but was now very much a part of. My phone buzzed. Another message. Sleep well, Dolcezza. Tomorrow we see if you're strong enough for this world. I traced the words on the screen, that endearment that tasted like danger, and something I didn't want to name. Strong enough. Was I? Could I be? I didn't know. But as I climbed into bed with sheets that cost more than a month's rent in my old life, I realized something that should have terrified me. I wanted to be. I wanted to prove myself to him. To this dangerous man, who'd pulled me from obscurity and given me significance. I wanted to be strong enough, smart enough, valuable enough to keep. And that wanting, that terrible, traitorous wanting, was the most dangerous thing of all. 3 weeks passed in a blur of transformation. Lucia became my constant companion, drilling me relentlessly in the skills I'd need to survive Valentino's world. Italian lessons until my tongue ached from unfamiliar pronunciations. Etiquette training that covered everything from which fork to use at formal dinners to how to exit a car without showing too much leg. Self-defense classes with the instructor named Marco, different from the restaurant manager who taught me how to break holds, where to strike, how to use my smaller size as an advantage. You're doing well, Lucia said one afternoon as we reviewed photographs of Valentino's associates and enemies. I had to memorize faces, names, loyalties, grudges that went back decades. Better than I expected, honestly. Most people Mr. Valentino brings into the organization take months to adapt. You're learning in weeks. I don't have months, I said, studying the face of a man named Konstantin Volkov. Russian mob, major rival, known for brutality. His enemies are already watching. I either learn fast or become a liability he has to eliminate. Lucia's silence confirmed what I already knew. There was no safety net here, no second chances. Either I became valuable enough to keep, or I became dangerous enough to dispose of. I saw Valentino sparingly during those weeks. Brief encounters that felt choreographed, calculated, dinner at exclusive restaurants where we played our roles for watching eyes. A gallery opening where his hand at my back sent messages to everyone present. A charity gala where I wore a dress that cost more than a year of my old salary and learned to smile while men who'd ordered murders discussed art and politics. But in private, away from cameras and witnesses, he remained distant, professional. Our conversations were brief, focused on my progress, my training, whether I was ready for the next step. The intimacy from that first lunch never returned, replaced by the cool assessment of a man evaluating an investment. It shouldn't have bothered me. This was a business arrangement, a transaction. Protection in exchange for obedience. Safety in exchange for loyalty. My feelings, whatever they were, had no place in the equation. Except they were there anyway, growing like weeds in cracks I didn't know existed, the way my pulse quickened when his name appeared on my phone, the way I found myself dressing more carefully on days I knew I'd see him, the way his rare smiles felt like victories I wanted to collect and hoard. I was developing feelings for my captor. The realization hit me one night as I stood at my windows, and the shame of it burned like acid. What kind of person fell for the man who'd bought her like property, who kept her in a gilded cage and called it protection? Someone desperate, I answered myself. Someone who'd been invisible for so long that any attention, even dangerous attention, felt like sunlight after years in darkness. The fourth week brought a shift. Valentino summoned me to his office, but this time Giovanni escorted me to a different location, a townhouse in the Upper East Side that screamed old money and older secrets. Armed men nodded as we entered, their deference to Giovanni absolute. Inside, the decor was different from the glass and steel of his corporate headquarters. Dark wood, leather, oil paintings that probably cost millions. This was the real seat of power, I realized. The place where his legitimate business ended and his other empire began. He was waiting in what looked like a study, standing before a massive fireplace, despite the summer heat outside. He'd discarded his jacket, rolled up his shirt sleeves, and for the first time I saw the ink on his forearms, elaborate tattoos that spoke of old traditions, of blood oaths and criminal heritage. They should have frightened me. Instead, I found them hypnotic, wanting to trace the patterns with my fingers. Sophie. He turned, and something in his expression was different, tense. Almost worried. We have a problem. Sit. I sat in the leather chair facing him, my stomach knotting with anxiety. What kind of problem? The Volkov family. He pulled out his phone, showed me a photograph. Me, leaving my building yesterday morning, captured from across the street. They're watching you more closely than I anticipated. Konstantin's nephew, Alexei, has been asking questions. About you, about your background, about your relationship to me. What does he want? Leverage. Proof that you're more than just a front, that I actually care about you. If they believe you're genuinely important to me, you become a target for kidnapping, for ransom, for... He stopped, jaw tightening. For things I won't let happen. So what do we do? My voice was steadier than I felt. He was quiet for a moment, studying the fire like it held answers. When he spoke, his voice was carefully controlled. We escalate the performance. We make them believe you're not just under my protection. You're integral to my life. He seemed to struggle with the word. My companion, in every sense. Understanding hit me like cold water. You want them to think we're... together. Yes, romantically involved. Living together. Sharing a bed. His eyes met mine, and for once, I saw uncertainty there. I'm moving you into my primary residence, my home. We'll be seen together constantly. You'll attend family functions, business meetings. You'll be at my side in situations where only someone truly trusted would be allowed. Won't that make me more of a target? Yes, but it also makes you too valuable to touch without starting a war. If they believe harming you would unleash my full wrath, they'll hesitate. And in that hesitation, we find safety. He moved closer, crouching before my chair so we were eye level. This is more than what I initially asked of you, Sophie. This is asking you to pretend to love me. To act as though you chose this, chose me. Can you do that? The irony wasn't lost on me. He was asking me to fake feelings that were already becoming dangerously real. Yes, I whispered, I can do that. There's something else. He reached into his pocket, pulled out a small velvet box. My heart stopped. This is for appearances only. Don't mistake it for something it's not. He opened the box. A ring gleamed inside, a sapphire the color of deep ocean water, surrounded by diamonds that caught the firelight and threw rainbows across the walls. It was the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen. An engagement ring? My voice came out strangled. The Volkovs need to believe I'm committed to you beyond mere protection. This sends that message. You wear this. We announce our engagement to select people, and you become untouchable. He took the ring from the box, held it up. This was my grandmother's. Wearing it means something in my world. It means family, legacy, permanence. It's the ultimate statement of ownership and protection. But it's not real, I said, needing to hear him confirm it. No, he agreed, it's not real. He slid the ring onto my finger anyway. It fit perfectly, of course. Everything in his carefully constructed world fit perfectly. I stared at it, this symbol of false promise, and felt something crack inside my chest. There's a family dinner tomorrow night, Valentino continued, standing and putting distance between us again. My uncle, my cousins, some of the old guard. They need to meet you, accept you. These are dangerous men, Sophie. Men who've known me since I was a child. They'll test you, push you, try to find cracks. You can't show weakness. You can't show fear. You need to be, he searched for the word, worthy of this ring, of this position, of me. What if I'm not? The question escaped before I could stop it. What if they see through me? What if I fail? He studied me for a long moment. Something unreadable in his winter gray eyes. Then he did something unexpected. He reached out and cupped my face, his thumb brushing my cheekbone with unexpected gentleness. Then I'll handle it. But you won't fail, Dolcezza. You're stronger than you believe. You've survived poverty, loneliness, invisibility. You can survive dinner with my family. And the touch lasted only seconds, but it burned into my skin, making me want to lean into his palm, to close my eyes and pretend this was real. When he withdrew, I felt the loss like physical pain. Giovanni will move your things to my residence today. I'll meet you there tonight. We'll have dinner together, just the two of us, before tomorrow's performance. You need to learn how I live, how I move through my private spaces. The details matter. He turned back to the fire, dismissing me. Lucia will brief you on the family members you'll be meeting. Study their files, know their loyalties, their ambitions, their weaknesses. Information is armor in my world. I stood on shaking legs, the ring heavy on my finger, a beautiful shackle. At the door, I paused. Dante? I used his first name for the first time, and saw his shoulders tense at the sound. Thank you for protecting me. Even if it's just business. It's not just business, Sophie. His voice was quiet, almost too quiet to hear. Not anymore. But he didn't turn around, didn't explain what he meant, and I fled before I could do something stupid like ask, like hope, like believe this could ever be more than an elaborate performance. That evening, Giovanni drove me to Valentino's residence, a brownstone in Brooklyn Heights that managed to be both fortress and home. Security was everywhere but subtle. Cameras hidden, guards positioned at strategic points. Inside, the decor surprised me. Warmer than his offices, more personal. Books lined the walls, art that looked collected over years rather than bought to impress. This was where Dante Valentino actually lived, where the performance dropped and the man remained. A woman in her 60s met me in the foyer, Mrs. Rosa, the housekeeper, who looked me over with sharp eyes that missed nothing. "So you're the girl," she said in heavily accented English. "The one who's turned his world upside down." "I didn't mean to. Didn't mean to," she snorted. "Nothing happens by accident around Mr. Valentino. If you're here, it's because he wants you here. Question is, do you want to be here? Or are you just another girl dazzled by money and power?" The accusation stung because part of it was true, but I met her eyes steadily. I want to survive. He's offering me a chance to do that. Everything else. I gestured vaguely at the ring, the house, the life I'd been thrust into. Everything else is just details. Something in her expression softened. Honest, at least. "Come, I'll show you to your room." "Well, your rooms. You get the entire third floor. Mr. Valentino's on the fourth, connected by internal stairs." She raised an eyebrow meaningfully. "For appearances." My suite was larger than my entire old apartment. Bedroom, sitting room, bathroom with a tub the size of a small pool, walk-in closet already stocked with clothes I hadn't chosen. And in the bedroom, on the dresser, was a photograph in a silver frame, Dante as a young boy, maybe 8 or 9, standing between an older couple who had his eyes, his bearing. His grandparents, I realized, the ones whose ring I now wore. "He was a beautiful child," Mrs. Rosa said from the doorway, "before the world made him hard, before he had to become what he is." She paused. "His grandmother would have liked you, I think. She always said he needed someone who wasn't afraid of him, someone who saw the boy beneath the monster." "I don't think he's a monster," I said softly. "Then you're either brave or foolish. Maybe both." She left me then, and I stood in that beautiful room, wearing a dead woman's ring, waiting for a man who owned me to come home. He arrived after dark, and I heard him moving through the house below, his voice low as he spoke with someone, Giovanni maybe, or other members of his organization. I'd changed into simple clothes, jeans and a sweater, wanting to feel like myself for these last moments before tomorrow's performance began. A knock at my door. My heart jumped. "Come in." Dante entered, and for the first time, I saw him in casual clothes, dark jeans, a black t-shirt that showed the full extent of his tattoos. His hair slightly mussed like he'd been running his hands through it. He looked younger like this, less untouchable, and dangerously more attractive. "Dinner's ready," he said. "Come, we eat in the kitchen tonight. Tomorrow we perform, tonight we prepare." I followed him downstairs to a kitchen that was clearly Mrs. Rosa's domain. She'd left food warming on the stove. Pasta, bread, wine, simple, homey, nothing like the restaurant meals we'd shared. Dante served us both, his movements comfortable and practiced. And I realized he actually cooked, actually lived like a normal person in these private moments. We ate in silence for a while, the only sound the clink of forks on plates. Then, "Are you frightened? Of tomorrow?" "Terrified," I admitted. "What if they hate me? What if they see I don't belong?" "They'll see what I show them, that you're under my protection and therefore untouchable." "But Sophie..." He set down his fork, those winter eyes intense. "If this becomes too much, if you truly can't bear it, tell me. I'll find another way to keep you safe. I won't force you to pretend to love me if the thought repulses you. It doesn't," I said before I could stop myself. "Repulse me, I mean. You don't repulse me." Something flashed in his expression. Surprise? Hope? It was gone too quickly to identify. Good. Because they'll be watching for chemistry, for genuine feeling. They'll test it. Tomorrow at dinner, you may see me do things, say things, that seem cruel. You need to trust that it's necessary. Can you do that? Yes. We finished dinner, and he walked me back to my suite, stopping at the door. "Sleep well, Dolcezza. Tomorrow, we show them you're mine. And after tomorrow, there's no going back. You understand that?" I nodded, my throat too tight for words. He reached out, tucked a strand of hair behind my ear, in a gesture that felt far too intimate for our arrangement. "Good night, Sophie. Good night, Dante." I watched him climb the stairs to his own floor, then closed my door and leaned against it, my heart racing, the ring heavy on my finger. Tomorrow I would meet his family, play the role of devoted fiancé, cement my place in his dangerous world. Tomorrow the performance would become more elaborate, more consuming, more impossible to distinguish from reality. And the terrifying truth I couldn't admit to anyone, not even myself. Part of me was looking forward to it. The family dinner was held at his uncle's estate in Westchester, a sprawling property that made Dante's brownstone look modest by comparison. Giovanni drove us in the armored SUV, Dante beside me in the back seat, his hand covering mine on my lap in a gesture that looked affectionate but felt like steadying anchor. I needed it. My palms were sweating, my heart hammering so hard I thought he must be able to hear it. "Remember," he murmured as we pulled through iron gates. "You belong here. You're mine, and that makes you family. They may test you, but they won't truly harm you. I won't allow it." The house was full of people when we arrived. Men in expensive suits, women dripping with jewelry, the air thick with cigarette smoke, and Italian conversations that flowed too fast for me to follow. Dante's hand moved to the small of my back, proprietary and protective, as he guided me through the crowd. Eyes followed us everywhere, assessing, judging, calculating. "Dante!" A booming voice cut through the noise. A large man with silver hair and Dante's eyes, family resemblance unmistakable, approached with arms spread wide. "Finally, you bring her to meet us. We were beginning to think she was a ghost." "Uncle Sal." Dante's voice was warm, affectionate in a way I'd never heard. "This is Sophie. Sophie, my uncle Salvatore, head of the family." I offered my hand, but Salvatore pulled me into a crushing hug instead, kissing both my cheeks in the traditional way. "Beautiful. Dante, you didn't tell us she was so beautiful. And that ring, Nonna's ring. Madonna, this is serious." "Very serious," Dante confirmed, his arm sliding around my waist, pulling me against his side. The gesture looked natural, felt electric. "Sophie is mine. I want that understood by everyone here." The message in his words was clear, a line being drawn, a claim being staked. Around us, I saw nods of understanding. Whispers passed between family members. I was being presented, accepted, absorbed into this dangerous dynasty. Dinner was an elaborate affair. Too many courses, too much wine, too many people whose names I struggled to remember despite Lucia's drilling. I sat beside Dante at the long table, his cousins and their wives surrounding us. Conversation flowing in a mix of English and Italian that left me dizzy trying to follow. But Dante never left me adrift. He translated quietly, included me, his attention split between family politics and making sure I was okay. It was during the main course that the testing began. "So, Sophie," said a woman named Gabriella, one of the cousins' wives, known for her sharp tongue and sharper ambitions according to Lucia's files. "How did you meet our Dante? It must be quite a story for him to give you Nonna's ring." The table went quiet, everyone watching, waiting. This was the moment. Truth or fiction? What story had we prepared? "I spilled wine on him," I said simply, deciding honesty was safer than elaborate lies. "At the restaurant where I worked, destroyed a very expensive suit. He could have had me fired, could have done much worse. Instead, he saw something in me worth protecting." "Worth owning, you mean?" Gabriella said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Gabriella." Dante's voice was quiet, but it cut like a blade. "Sophie is not owned, she is cherished. There's a difference. Perhaps you've forgotten what that looks like." The rebuke hung in the air, sharp enough to draw blood. Gabriella's face flushed, but she nodded, chastened. Around the table, I saw respect in the eyes of the older generation. Dante defending his woman, putting family members in their place when necessary. It was a display of power, of priorities. His hand found my thigh under the table, squeezed gently. Reassurance, approval, possession. I forced myself not to flinch at the intimacy, reminding myself this was performance, this was necessary. Even if my skin burned where he touched me. Even if I wanted to cover his hand with mine and never let go. After dinner, the men retreated to Salvatore's study for business talk. The real reason for this gathering, I realized. But before Dante could follow, his uncle stopped him. "Bring her. If she's to be family, truly family, she should understand what that means." Dante hesitated, his eyes meeting mine in a silent question. I nodded, even though fear coiled in my stomach. I'd come this far. I couldn't back down now. The study was dominated by a massive desk and walls lined with books that probably hadn't been read in decades. The men settled into leather chairs. Cigars were lit. Glasses of amber liquid poured. I sat in the corner, trying to be invisible. But Salvatore gestured me forward. No, sit beside Dante. You're his fiancé, not his servant." I moved to the chair beside Dante's, and his hand immediately found mine, our fingers interlacing in a gesture that felt far too natural. The conversation that followed was conducted mostly in Italian, but enough was in English for me to understand the stakes: territory disputes, rival families encroaching on their businesses, the need for stronger alliances and more aggressive tactics. "The Volkovs are becoming bold," one cousin said, his name escaping me. "They've been making moves in our neighborhoods, recruiting our people. Constantine thinks we're weak, then we remind him otherwise," Dante said calmly, his thumb tracing circles on the back of my hand in an absent gesture that made concentration difficult. "We've tolerated their provocations because open war is bad for business. But there are limits to my patience." "What about the girl?" Gabriella's husband, Carlo, jerked his chin toward me. "They know about her. She's vulnerability. They could use her against you. They could try." Dante's voice went cold, deadly. "And in trying, they would discover exactly how far I'll go to protect what's mine. Sophie is not a weakness. She's a line in the sand. Anyone who crosses it dies." The casual way he discussed murder, violence, death. It should have terrified me. Instead, I felt something warm unfurl in my chest. He meant it. He would kill for me. This man who barely knew me, who'd taken me as property, who kept me in a gilded cage. He would burn the world down if anyone tried to hurt me. It was insane. It was dangerous. It was intoxicating. The meeting continued for another hour. Strategies discussed and decisions made that would affect countless lives. I sat silent, observing, learning the dynamics of this criminal empire. Who held real power, who was loyal, who was ambitious. And through it all, Dante kept me close, his touch constant, marking me as his in front of everyone who mattered. We left after midnight, exhaustion making my limbs heavy. In the SUV, Dante finally released my hand, and I immediately missed the contact. "You did well," he said quietly. "Better than well." Salvatore was impressed. "That's not easy to achieve. They're going to war," I said. "Because of me. Because the Volkovs see me as a way to hurt you. They were always going to war. You're just the excuse, not the cause." He turned to me, and in the dim light of the passing street lamps, his face looked younger, almost vulnerable. "Does it bother you? Knowing what I do, the violence I'm capable of?" "It should," I admitted. "But no, it doesn't. Is that wrong? Am I broken for not being horrified?" "You're not broken, Dolcezza. You're adaptable. It's why you've survived this long." His hand rose, cupped my cheek. "And why you'll survive what comes next." "What does come next?" His expression hardened. "The Volkovs make their move. They'll try to take you, to prove I'm not as powerful as I claim. And when they do, you need to be ready." Fear spiked through me. Ready how? "Trust me. Follow my lead. And when I tell you to do something, no matter how strange it seems, you do it without question. Can you promise me that?" "Yes," I whispered, even though I had no idea what I was agreeing to. The attack came 3 days later. I was leaving the brownstone for a fitting appointment with Lucia. More clothes, more armor for my role as Dante's fiancé. Giovanni was with me, plus 2 other guards whose names I'd learned, Marco and Tony. We'd just reached the SUV when the first shot rang out. Time fragmented into chaos. Giovanni shoved me to the ground, his body covering mine. More gunfire, the sound deafening in the quiet Brooklyn street. Screaming. Mine? Someone else's? Marco fell, blood blooming across his chest. Tony returned fire, his gun appearing from nowhere. And through it all, Giovanni's voice in my ear. "Stay down. Don't move. Don't fucking move." Then different voices, Russian accents, hands grabbing me despite Giovanni's attempts to shield me. A sharp pain in my neck, needle, injection, something that made the world go soft and blurry. The last thing I saw before darkness took me was Giovanni's face, bloodied but alive, his mouth forming words I couldn't hear over the ringing in my ears. I woke in darkness. Not complete darkness. There was a sliver of light under what must be a door. My head throbbed, my mouth tasted like metal, and my hands were zip-tied behind my back. Concrete floor, cold and rough. The smell of mold and rust. Basement? Warehouse? Somewhere far from help. Panic clawed at my throat, but I forced it down, remembering Dante's words. Be ready. Trust me. He'd known this would happen. He'd prepared me for this, even if I hadn't understood at the time. The door opened, light flooding in, making me squint. 2 men entered, Russians, based on their conversation. One was young, maybe my age, with cold eyes and a cruel smile. The other was older, scarred, dangerous. "She's awake." The young one, Alexei, I recognized from photos, said in accented English. "Good. We have questions for you, little bird, about Dante Valentino, about his operations, his weaknesses, and you're going to answer them." "I don't know anything," I said, my voice hoarse. "I'm just his whore?" Alexei crouched in front of me, his smile widening. "No, I don't think so. He gave you his grandmother's ring. He introduced you to his family. He killed 3 of our men last month when they got too close to your building. You're more than just a fuck to him. You're leverage." He reached for me, and I did what Marco had taught me in our self-defense sessions. I lunged forward, using my head as a weapon, connecting with his nose with a satisfying crunch. He screamed, stumbled back, blood pouring. The older man laughed, pulling Alexei away. "She's got spirit, this one. Constantine will enjoy breaking her." They left me then, and I fought against the zip ties until my wrists bled, until exhaustion made me collapse against the wall. Hours passed. Maybe. Time was meaningless in the darkness. I thought about Dante, about his winter gray eyes and the way he'd held my hand at dinner. About Mrs. Rose's words, someone who saw the boy beneath the monster. About the ring on my finger, heavy with meaning I still didn't fully understand. I must have dozed, because the explosion woke me, distant but powerful enough to shake the building. Gunfire followed, automatic weapons creating a symphony of violence that made my earlier kidnapping look like amateur hour. Shouting in Russian, then Italian, then the distinctive sound of Dante's voice, cold and commanding even through the chaos. The door to my prison burst open. Dante stood silhouetted in the doorway, gun in hand, his suit splattered with blood that I knew instinctively wasn't his. Behind him, Giovanni and a team of armed men swept through, securing the space with military precision. Sophie. My name on his lips sounded like a prayer and a curse. He was across the room in seconds, cutting my restraints with a knife that appeared from nowhere. His hands checking me for injuries with surprising gentleness. Did they hurt you? Did they touch you? I'm okay, I managed, even though I was shaking violently. I broke Alexei's nose. He's going to be pissed. A smile ghosted across his blood-stained face. Good girl. Then his expression hardened. But he won't be pissed for long. Stand up. I need you to do something for me. Something important. Do you trust me? Yes, I said without hesitation, and meant it completely. He pulled me to my feet, then handed me his gun. My eyes widened. Dante, I don't... Listen carefully. In the next room, Alexei is secured, wounded but alive. The Volkovs need to believe I'm ruthless enough to have my woman execute their heir. They need to fear what we'll do together. I need you to walk in there, point this gun at him and pull the trigger. My blood went cold. You want me to kill him? No, Dolcezza. I want you to pretend to kill him. He pulled something from his pocket, a small vial. This is a very powerful sedative. Alexei's already been injected with it. In approximately 2 minutes, his heart rate will slow to almost nothing. He'll appear dead for 6 to 8 hours. But you won't know that. As far as you're concerned, I'm asking you to execute a man in cold blood. I need your reaction to be genuine. I need the Volkovs, who are watching through cameras we've deliberately left active, to believe you just murdered their nephew for me. Understanding crashed over me. This was the test. The ultimate performance. Sir, I whispered, using the formal address deliberately, my voice shaking with genuine fear. Pretend you're dead? What happens next? His eyes softened fractionally. What happens next is we win. We show them that you're not just under my protection. You're willing to kill for me. That you're not a weakness, but a weapon. After tonight, they'll never touch you again. They'll be too afraid of what we are together. And if I can't do it, if they see through the act, then I'll handle it another way. But Sophie... He cupped my face, his thumbs brushing away tears I hadn't realized were falling. You're stronger than you know. You've survived everything life has thrown at you. You can survive this too. I took the gun, the weight of it foreign and terrible in my hands. Dante led me to the next room, where Alexei sat tied to a chair, his face already pale, his breathing shallow. The sedative was working. Around us, I could feel the watching eyes of Dante's men, the presence of cameras capturing every moment. Do it, Dante commanded, his voice hard, the tenderness from moments ago completely gone. Show them what happens to anyone who touches what's mine. I raised the gun, my hands shaking so badly I almost dropped it. Alexei's eyes were already glassy, unfocused. Was he really going into a death-like state? Or was Dante lying, asking me to actually commit murder? Did it matter? In this moment, with the gun in my hands and Dante's eyes burning into my back, I had to choose. Trust or betrayal, obedience or rebellion, the life he offered or the death that waited if I refused. I thought about the girl I'd been, invisible, drowning, disposable. I thought about the woman I was becoming. Protected, significant, chosen. I thought about Dante's hands holding mine, his voice calling me Dolcezza, his promise that I belonged to him, and he to me in ways that transcended the performance. I pulled the trigger. The gun clicked, empty. No bullet, just sound and fury signifying nothing but my willingness to cross that final line for him. Alexei slumped forward, the sedative taking full effect, his chest barely moving. To anyone watching, he looked dead. I looked dead too, probably. Pale, shaking, the gun falling from my nerveless fingers. Dante was there immediately, catching me before I collapsed, pulling me against his chest. "It's done," he murmured into my hair, his voice for me alone. "You're magnificent, terrifying, and magnificent. They'll never doubt you again, never doubt us. He's not really dead," I whispered against his shoulder, needing to hear it confirmed. "No. But they think he is, and that's what matters." He pulled back, his hands framing my face. "You just declared war for me, Dolcezza. You just proved you're mine in every way that counts. Do you understand what that means?" I did. It meant no going back. It meant I was no longer Sophie Chen, struggling waitress, invisible girl. I was Sophie Valentino, soon to be if this engagement became real. I was the woman who'd kill for the Mafia boss, the woman who'd chosen him over morality, safety, sanity. The woman who'd stopped performing and started meaning it. "Take me home," I said, exhausted beyond measure. "Please, Dante, just take me home." "Home," he repeated, and something in his expression shifted, something vulnerable and real and far more dangerous than any gun. "Yes, let's go home." The weeks that followed were a strange new reality. The Volkoffs, believing their nephew dead and his blood on my hands, pulled back from open confrontation. They didn't surrender. Dante explained that families like theirs never truly surrendered, but they negotiated, seeking peace rather than continued war. The story of the Mafia boss's fiancé executing their heir in cold blood spread through the underworld like wildfire, making me both feared and untouchable. But more than the external changes, something shifted between Dante and me. The performance we'd been maintaining, the touches, the looks, the intimacy, started feeling less like acting and more like truth, seeping through cracks in our defenses. He spent more time at home, less time at offices and meetings. We had dinner together most nights, real conversations that went beyond strategy and survival. He taught me Italian properly, laughing when I butchered pronunciations, patient in ways I never expected. I learned about his childhood, his grandmother who'd taught him that strength and honor could coexist, his parents who'd died when he was 16, leaving him to inherit an empire he'd never wanted, but learned to command. And I told him about me, not just the facts he already knew, but the feelings underneath, the loneliness of being nobody's daughter, the dreams I'd abandoned because survival took priority, the fear that had been my constant companion until he'd replaced it with something I didn't want to name. 2 months after the Alexei incident, I woke to find Dante sitting in the chair beside my bed, watching me in the early morning light, not threatening, just present. "You're supposed to be on the 4th floor, I mumbled, sleep fuzzy and confused. "I know." He was quiet for a moment. "Sophie, I need to tell you something. About us. About this arrangement." My heart clenched. This was it. He was ending it, had found a better solution, didn't need me anymore. "Okay. When I gave you that ring, I told you it wasn't real, that this engagement was for show, for protection, for strategy." He moved to sit on the edge of my bed, his weight making the mattress dip. I lied. "What?" Not consciously. Not at first. But somewhere between that dinner with my family and watching you break Alexei's nose. Between teaching you Italian and listening to you laugh at Mrs. Rosa's terrible jokes. He reached out, took my hand, the one wearing his grandmother's ring. It became real for me. You became real for me. Not an asset or a responsibility or a strategy, just Sophie, the woman who saw past the monster to the man underneath, the woman who chose to stay even when I gave her the option to leave, the woman I'm terrified of losing. I stared at him, my mind unable to process his words. "You're saying, I'm saying I love you, Dolcezza. I'm saying this engagement doesn't have to be pretend anymore if you don't want it to be. I'm saying marry me, really marry me, and let me spend the rest of my life keeping you safe and making you happy. and showing you that you were never disposable. You were always meant to be cherished. Tears spilled down my cheeks, hot and unstoppable. I was falling for my captor. I thought I was crazy. I thought, you weren't falling for your captor. You were falling for the man who fell for you first. He pulled me into his arms, and this time there was no performance, no audience, no purpose beyond the simple need to hold each other. I know the circumstances were wrong. I know I took your choice away at first, but I'm giving it back now. Choose me, Sophie. Not because you're afraid or obligated or trapped. Choose me because you want to, because this, he gestured between us, is worth fighting for. Yes. I whispered against his chest, breathing in bergamot and smoke and safety. Yes, I choose you. I choose this. I choose us. He kissed me then, our first real kiss, and it was nothing like I'd imagined during all those nights lying awake thinking about him. It was better, desperate and gentle, claiming and cherishing, a promise sealed in the gray light of dawn. We married 3 months later, a small ceremony by his family's standards. Salvatore gave me away since I had no father. Mrs. Rosa cried through the entire service. Giovanni stood as Dante's best man, his scarred face actually smiling, and when Dante slipped the wedding band beside his grandmother's ring, when he promised to love and protect me for the rest of our lives, I knew he meant every word. The honeymoon was 2 weeks in Sicily, where the Valentino family originated, where Dante showed me olive groves and ancient villages and the grave of the grandmother whose ring I wore. We walked through centuries-old streets hand in hand, no guards visible though I knew they were there, no performances necessary because we'd finally found the truth underneath all the pretending. What would you have done? I asked one evening as we watched the sunset paint the Mediterranean gold and crimson, if I'd chosen to disappear that first day? If I'd taken the relocation and the new identity? Dante was quiet for a long moment, his arm around my shoulders, his breath warm against my temple. I would have let you go, made sure you were safe, then spent the rest of my life wondering what might have been if you'd stayed. I'm glad I stayed. So am I, Dolcezza. So am I. We returned to New York as husband and wife, to the brownstone that had stopped being a prison and become a home, to the life we'd built from chaos and danger and an accidental spilled glass of wine. The threats didn't disappear. They never would in Dante's world. But we faced them together. I learned the business, became more than just his wife, but his partner, his confidant, his equal in ways that made his enemies hesitate and his allies respect. And on quiet nights when the city slept and danger felt far away, we'd sit together in his study, my head on his shoulder, his fingers tracing patterns on my arm, both of us marveling at the strange and violent and beautiful path that had led us here. From invisible waitress to mafia wife, from drowning to floating, from performing love to living it. The transformation should have broken me. Instead, it had made me whole. I love you, I whispered into the comfortable silence. I love you more, Dante replied, pressing a kiss to my hair. My Sophie, my Dolcezza, my everything. And in his arms, wearing his grandmother's ring and his love like armor, I finally understood what Rosa had meant that first night. I wasn't disposable anymore. I was cherished. I was chosen. I was home. The waitress who'd begged the Mafia boss for mercy had found something far more valuable than safety. She'd found someone willing to pretend to be dead and then prove he'd die for real to keep her alive. She'd found someone who saw her when the whole world had looked away. She'd found love in the last place she ever expected to look, in the winter-gray eyes of a dangerous man who'd given her a choice, and then made her realize she'd always been choosing him, from that very first moment when wine had spilled and fate had intervened. And that, in the end, was the greatest performance of all. Two people pretending they didn't belong together until the pretending became truth.